But the beauty who arrived changed his life forever, though he expected a plain bride. He had never imagined marriage as something beautiful or exciting. For him it was simply another duty, like paying bills or showing up to work every morning. He was a man shaped by responsibility, not dreams. Life had taught him early that expectations often lead to disappointment, so he learned to keep them low, very low. He lived a quiet, structured life. His days followed the same pattern. Wake up early, go to work, come back home tired, eat alone, and sleep. There was no chaos, but there was no joy either. Somewhere along the way, emotions had become heavy, so he packed them away carefully, like old clothes he no longer needed. People around him often described him as calm and mature, but inside, he felt empty. His family worried about him. They saw how lonely his life had become, even though he never complained. Every family gathering ended with the same conversation. They told him it was time to settle down, to start a new chapter. At first, he ignored them. Then he resisted. Finally, he gave in, not because he believed in marriage, but because he was tired of saying no. When the proposal was arranged, he did not ask many questions. He did not ask about the girl's personality, her interests, or her dreams. He only asked if she came from a respectful family. That was enough for him. In his mind, the future was already written. Two people sharing a house, fulfilling responsibilities, living separate emotional lives under the same roof. Relatives spoke casually about the bride. They described her as simple, quiet, and ordinary. Someone mentioned she was not very talkative. Another said she preferred staying in the background. These descriptions only confirmed what he already believed. He nodded silently, feeling neither excitement nor fear, only acceptance. Deep down, he told himself that this was better. A simple bride would mean a simple life. No high expectations, no emotional demands, no surprises. He believed peace came from predictability, not passion. He reminded himself that love was not necessary for survival. People lived without it all the time. As the wedding date approached, others around him grew busy and emotional. There were discussions, preparations, and endless opinions. He stayed distant from all of it. When asked how he felt, he replied with short, polite answers. He did not want to explain what he himself did not fully understand. At night, when the house grew quiet, his thoughts sometimes wandered, not toward the bride, but toward his past. Memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit slowly surfaced. Moments where trust had broken, where hope had faded. Times when he had believed in people only to be disappointed. Those experiences had shaped him into the man he was now. Careful, guarded, and emotionally distant. He convinced himself that marriage would not change him. He would remain the same person, living the same life, just with another presence in the house. He planned clear boundaries in his mind. Respect, responsibility, and distance, that was all. On the outside, he appeared ready. On the inside, he felt like someone walking into a room with the lights turned off, unsure of what waited ahead, but unwilling to search for it. The night before the wedding, he sat alone in his room. His phone buzzed with messages of congratulations and advice. He read none of them. Instead, he stared at the wall, listening to the quiet hum of the fan above him. He felt no nervousness, no excitement, just a strange stillness, like the pause before a long journey he never wanted to take. He reminded himself that many people married without love and lived decent lives. That thought gave him comfort. He believed emotions complicated things, and simplicity was safer. If the bride truly was plain and quiet, things would be easier. There would be fewer questions, fewer conflicts, fewer expectations. The wedding morning arrived faster than he expected. The house filled with voices, movement, and color. Relatives came and went. Instructions were given. Laughter echoed through the halls. He moved through it all like a visitor, present but disconnected. As he got ready, he looked at himself in the mirror. He saw a man who looked composed, responsible, and calm. No one could tell that behind those eyes lived years of silence and emotional distance. He adjusted his clothes and took a deep breath, not to calm his nerves, but to steady himself for what lay ahead. When someone jokingly asked if he was excited to meet his bride, he forced a small smile. He did not answer. There was nothing to say. In his mind, he had already placed her in a box labeled ordinary. He did not mean it as an insult. To him, ordinary meant safe, predictable, manageable. He believed that expecting nothing protected a person from pain. As the wedding ceremony began, he followed each step without much thought. The rituals felt like motions learned by heart, passed down through generations. He focused on doing everything correctly, avoiding eye contact, staying composed. This was not a moment he wanted to analyze deeply. He stood there, unaware that his carefully built assumptions were about to be challenged. He did not know that the life he had accepted without hope was standing on the edge of change. At that moment, he believed he was stepping into a future exactly as he had imagined, quiet, plain, and emotionally distant. He was wrong. The ceremony moved forward in its usual rhythm, with familiar sounds and repeated words filling the space. He stood quietly, doing exactly what was expected of him. His mind stayed calm and distant, just as he had planned. For him, this was a formal step, nothing more. He did not look around much, and he did not try to feel anything special. He believed emotions only made things complicated. Then there was a soft movement nearby, a gentle shift in the air. People around him straightened, and the quiet noise of whispers slowly spread. He noticed the change, but did not turn immediately. He assumed it was just another part of the ceremony. When he finally looked, his thoughts stopped. The bride had arrived. For a moment he felt as if time slowed down. She stood there with a calm presence that was impossible to ignore. Her appearance was graceful, but it was not just about how she looked. There was confidence in the way she carried herself, a quiet strength in her posture and peace in her expression. She did not appear nervous or unsure. She looked composed, as if she fully understood the moment she was stepping into. He blinked, unsure of what he was feeling. This was not what he had imagined. This was not the ordinary image he had built in his mind. He quickly reminded himself not to jump to conclusions. Appearances could be misleading, he told himself. Still, something inside him felt unsettled. As she took her place, he avoided staring. He focused on breathing normally and keeping his face neutral. He did not want anyone to notice his surprise. Around them, relatives exchanged glances and quiet comments, clearly impressed. He caught fragments of their words, but tried to ignore them. Throughout the ceremony, he became more aware of her presence. It was strange. She was silent, respectful, and calm. Yet she seemed to bring a different energy into the space. When their eyes briefly met, he looked away quickly, feeling an unfamiliar discomfort. It was not fear, and it was not attraction in the way he understood it. It was something else, something he could not name. He told himself to stay grounded. This was still a marriage arranged by others. One moment could not change who he was or what he believed. He reminded himself of his past, of the promises he had made to himself to never expect too much from people. Once the ceremony ended, the formal greetings began. People smiled, offered blessings, and shared advice. He responded politely, just as he always did. The bride did the same. Her voice, when he heard it for the first time, was soft but clear. She spoke with respect and confidence, choosing her words carefully. He noticed that she listened more than she spoke. When elders talked, she gave them her full attention. When someone joked, she smiled naturally. Nothing about her behavior felt forced. This only deepened his confusion. Later, when they sat together, silence filled the space between them. He had expected awkwardness, but instead there was a strange calm. She did not try to start unnecessary conversation. She did not look uncomfortable either. She simply sat there, composed and thoughtful. He wondered if she felt the same emotional distance he did. He wondered if she had also accepted this marriage as a responsibility rather than a dream. The thought gave him a small sense of relief. As the day moved on, traditions continued and responsibility shifted. He found himself observing her without meaning to. The way she responded patiently to tiring rituals. The way she maintained kindness even when clearly exhausted. There was no complaint, no sign of frustration. Something inside him began to soften, though he resisted it. He reminded himself again. One day did not define a lifetime. People often behave differently at the beginning. Reality showed itself later. When evening came and the celebrations slowly faded, a quiet moment finally arrived. They were left sitting in a room meant to feel welcoming but unfamiliar to both of them. The noise from outside was distant now, replaced by silence. He did not know what to say. Words felt unnecessary and risky. He did not want to open doors he had kept closed for years. Before he could speak, she gently broke the silence. She spoke simply, thanking him for being respectful and patient throughout the day. Her tone was calm, not emotional. There was no expectation in her voice. Just courtesy. He nodded and replied briefly. The conversation ended there, but the impact lingered. That small exchange felt different from what he had prepared for. There was no pressure, no demand for connection. As the night deepened, they kept their distance, both physically and emotionally. He was grateful for that. Yet, as he lay awake later, sleep refused to come easily. His thoughts returned to her presence. Not her appearance alone, but the calm she carried. It unsettled him because it challenged his assumptions. He had expected silence to feel heavy, but with her, it felt light. He reminded himself again that this was just the beginning. People changed once routines began. He had seen it happen before. He promised himself not to read too much into small moments. Still, his mind replayed brief details. The steadiness in her voice, the confidence in her eyes, the patience in her actions, these were not qualities he had expected in a plain life. Next morning, normal life slowly resumed. Guests prepared to leave, and responsibilities returned. He watched as she managed tasks with quiet efficiency. She asked before doing anything, showing respect for his space. It was thoughtful, and it made him uncomfortable in a way he could not explain. He had prepared himself for emotional distance, not gentle understanding. At one point, he noticed her standing by a window, looking outside thoughtfully. There was depth in her expression, as if she carried a story of her own. He realized for the first time that he had never wondered about her life before this marriage, what she had left behind, what she hoped for, what she feared. That realization surprised him. He quickly dismissed it. Curiosity led to attachment, and attachment led to pain. He had learned that lesson long ago. Yet something had undeniably shifted. The certainty he had carried before felt weaker now. His carefully built expectations no longer felt solid. Without realizing it, he had taken the first step away from emotional isolation. He did not know it yet, but the simple arrival of someone he had underestimated had already begun to change the direction of his life. Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly in a way that was impossible to ignore. And deep inside, a question slowly formed, one he had not asked himself in years. Life did not suddenly change after the wedding. There was no dramatic shift, no big emotional moment that turned everything upside down. Instead, change arrived quietly, in ways so small that he almost did not notice them at first. Days passed and routines slowly formed, yet something felt different, even though he could not clearly explain what it was. They began living under the same roof, sharing the same space, but not the same emotions. At least that was how he believed it would be. He kept his distance, just as he had planned. He spoke when necessary and stayed silent when words were not needed. He focused on work and responsibilities, using busyness as a shield. She did not question his silence. That surprised him. He had expected curiosity, maybe complaints, or at least confusion, but she respected his space naturally, without making him feel guilty. She moved around the house with care, as if she understood that every corner held unspoken boundaries. She asked before changing anything. She listened more than she spoke. Slowly, the house began to feel less empty. It was not because of noise or activity. It was because of her presence. She had a way of being there without demanding attention. In the mornings, he noticed that his meals were prepared thoughtfully, not fancy, just simple and warm. If he came home late, there was no questioning look, no disappointment on her face, just a calm greeting. At first, this made him uneasy. He was not used to kindness without conditions. In his past, care often came with expectations. Support usually demanded something in return. But with her, things felt balanced. She gave without asking, and that confused him more than distance ever had. They shared small conversations now and then, nothing deep, nothing emotional, just everyday words about the house, the weather, or simple plans. Still, those brief exchanges carried a strange comfort. Her voice never sounded rushed. "Ah," she spoke with patience as if she believed every word deserved care. One evening, he came home exhausted. Work had been heavy, and his mind felt crowded. He expected the usual silence, but instead, he noticed a quiet warmth in the room. She had kept the lights soft, and everything felt calm. She did not ask about his day, but she noticed his tiredness. Without saying much, she gave him space and comfort at the same time. That night, he slept better than he had in a long time. Days turned into weeks. Without realizing it, he started noticing details. The way she remembered small things, the way she handled stress without panic, the way she treated others with respect even when they were difficult. These were not things one pretended for long. They came from character. It startled him. Smiling had not been natural for him for years. He quickly corrected himself whenever he noticed, as if happiness were something forbidden. That was perhaps the most powerful thing she did. She allowed him to be exactly who he was, without trying to change him. In that quiet acceptance, something inside him began to relax. One afternoon, he came home earlier than usual and found her reading. She looked up, surprised, then smiled gently. That smile stayed with him longer than he expected, not because it was beautiful, but because it felt sincere. He began to wonder how someone could be so steady. He started asking small questions, almost by accident, about her day, about her interests, about her family. She answered honestly but briefly, never oversharing, never hiding. He learned that she had also accepted this marriage with courage, not fantasy. She had her own fears, her own adjustments to make. That realization changed something in him. He had assumed he was the only one making the sacrifice. He had believed responsibility rested only on his shoulders, but she had left behind her own world, stepped into an unfamiliar life, and done so with grace. One evening they talked longer than usual. The conversation flowed naturally, without effort. They laughed softly over something simple. The sound of his own laughter felt strange, like hearing an old song he had forgotten. For a moment the walls he had built did not feel so necessary. Later that night he questioned himself. Why was this affecting him? He reminded himself again that small moments could be misleading. That comfort did not always lead to lasting peace. He had trusted before and paid the price. He did not want to repeat that mistake. Yet his heart did not fully listen to reason. He began looking forward to coming home. That thought unsettled him deeply. Home had always been a place of rest, not anticipation. Now, it carried a quiet pull. He noticed changes in himself. He became more patient, less distant, more present. He started sharing small opinions, small thoughts, things he once kept locked away. She listened without interrupting, without judgment. That safety was unfamiliar. There were moments when old habits returned, days when he became quiet again, pulling back without explanation. She noticed, but she did not react. She did not accuse or question. She simply gave him time. That patience spoke louder than words. One night, he overheard someone speaking about her kindness. He felt a strange sense of pride, quickly followed by fear. Pride led to attachment, attachment led to vulnerability, and vulnerability scared him. His past had taught him that opening up invited pain. He had survived by closing himself off. Letting someone in felt like stepping onto unstable ground. Still, the ground beneath him did not shake. Instead, it felt steady. He realized that the biggest change was not happening around him, but within him. His guarded heart was slowly learning that not every connection ended in loss. That some people entered your life not to break you, but to heal quietly. He did not say these thoughts out loud. He kept them hidden, unsure of what they meant. But he could no longer deny the truth. The woman he had expected to live beside him like a stranger was slowly becoming someone who mattered. And that realization frightened him more than loneliness ever had. Because for the first time in years, he was not just surviving life. He was beginning to feel it. The peace he had slowly started to feel did not last forever. Life rarely allowed calm to remain untouched for long. Just when he began to believe that things could stay steady, the past found a way to return, quietly but firmly. It started with small signs. He became restless again. His thoughts wandered late at night, and sleep grew lighter. Memories he had buried carefully began to surface without warning. Old disappointments, broken trust, and moments when he had felt foolish for believing in people replayed in his mind. He did not share these thoughts with her. Instead, he pulled back. She noticed the change. His words became shorter. The silences grew longer. The warmth he had slowly allowed into his behavior faded, replaced by distance. He spent more time at work, came home later than usual, and avoided eye contact. It was not because of her, but he did not explain that. Fear had taken control again. She did not react with anger. That confused him even more. She continued her routine calmly, treating him with the same respect as before. There were no complaints, no emotional scenes, no pressure to explain himself. But her quiet patience made him uncomfortable. It forced him to face what he was avoiding. One evening, a family gathering brought everything closer to the surface. Relatives spoke casually, making comments about expectations, responsibilities, and married life. Some words were careless, but they struck deep. They reminded him of past moments when promises had been made easily and broken just as easily. He became quiet after that night. Back home, the silence felt heavier than before. He sat alone, staring into nothing, lost in thoughts that no longer belonged to the present. She noticed him sitting there and hesitated before approaching. She did not want to cross a line, but she also did not want to remain a stranger. She spoke gently, asking if something was bothering him. The question was simple, but it shook him. He was not ready to answer. Words felt dangerous. Opening up felt like inviting pain back into his life, so he gave a vague response and ended the conversation quickly. He could see the understanding in her eyes, but also a quiet sadness. It was subtle, but it stayed with him. That night, Guilt replaced fear. He realized that while he was protecting himself, he was also pushing away someone who had done nothing to deserve distance, someone who had only shown patience and care. The thought troubled him deeply. Days passed like this, heavy and uncertain. Then something unexpected happened. A small misunderstanding grew into a moment of tension. It was nothing serious, just a simple situation that could have been resolved easily, but his emotional walls turned it into more. He reacted coldly, speaking with distance instead of calm. The moment passed quickly, but the damage lingered. She remained quiet afterward, not distant, just quiet. It was not peaceful like before. It felt full of unsaid words. For the first time, he felt afraid of losing something he had not even fully accepted yet. Later that night, he could not sleep. His mind replayed the moment again and again. He realized that his fear of pain was slowly turning into the cause of pain. He had promised himself never to hurt anyone because of his past, yet here he was doing exactly that. He understood then that avoiding emotions did not protect people. It only delayed the truth. The next day, he noticed a change in her. She was still respectful, still kind, but more reserved. She gave him space, not because she was patient, but because she was protecting herself. That realization struck him hard. For the first time, he truly reflected on his own behavior. He had entered this marriage believing distance was safety. But safety without connection was just another form of loneliness. She had given him understanding without demands, and he had responded with walls. That evening, he made a decision he had avoided for years. He chose honesty. When they finally sat together in quiet, he spoke slowly, carefully. He did not tell his entire story, but he shared enough. He spoke about fear, about trust, about how the past had shaped him into someone who struggled to believe in lasting peace. His voice was steady, but his hands were tense. She listened. She did not interrupt. She did not judge. She did not try to fix anything. She simply listened, the same way she always had. When he finished, the room felt lighter, as if something heavy had been lifted. She shared her own truth. She spoke about her fears, about leaving behind familiarity, about stepping into a life with someone emotionally distant. She admitted that patience was not always easy, but she chose it because she believed understanding mattered more than forcing closeness. Her words were calm but powerful. He realized then that strength did not always appear loud. Sometimes it appeared as quiet consistency. That conversation changed something between them. Not everything became perfect. Not all fears disappeared, but a bridge formed where there had only been distance. For the first time, he did not feel alone in his struggle. Still, a final test remained. Old habits do not disappear overnight. Doubt returned again, quietly whispering that trust was risky, that vulnerability led to loss. But this time, he noticed it. He did not let it control him completely. He observed how she stayed steady even when things felt uncertain, how she chose honesty over silence, how she gave space without abandoning connection. He understood then that love was not about dramatic gestures or constant closeness. It was about choosing each other, even when fear made it difficult. One night, as they sat together without speaking, he realized something important. The turning point was not the moment he met her. It was the moment he chose not to run away. He had spent years avoiding emotional risk, believing it kept him safe. But real safety, he now saw, came from trust built slowly, patiently, and honestly. The past had shaped him, but it did not have to control his future. And as he looked at the woman beside him, calm and steady even after moments of distance, he understood that this chapter of his life was no longer about fear. It was about choice. A choice to stay. A choice to trust. The man who once expected a quiet, empty life was standing at the edge of something real, something fragile yet strong. The days after that honest conversation felt different, though nothing on the surface had changed much. The house looked the same. The routines stayed familiar. Yet something inside him had shifted quietly, like a door left slightly open after years of being locked. He no longer felt the need to guard every thought. He still had moments of silence, but now they were not filled with fear. They were simply pauses. When he spoke, his words came more naturally. When he listened, he truly heard her. There was no pressure between them to be perfect. There was only effort, steady and real. He began to understand that healing did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, through consistency. Through showing up every day, even when it felt uncomfortable. She did not rush him, and he stopped rushing himself. One morning he noticed something simple but powerful. He woke up feeling calm. There was no heavy weight on his chest. No need to prepare himself emotionally for the day. He lay there for a moment, listening to the quiet sounds of the house, and realized that peace had entered his life without asking permission. He started doing small things differently. He came home earlier when he could. He asked her opinion on matters he once handled alone. He shared stories from his day, even when they were ordinary. She responded with interest, not because the stories were exciting, but because they were his. That care mattered more than he expected. He noticed changes in her, too. She smiled more freely now. Her words carried ease. The careful distance she once kept had softened, replaced by comfort. They were not pretending anymore. They were learning each other honestly. One evening, as they prepared a simple meal together, he felt something he had not felt in years, a sense of belonging. Not the kind that demanded anything, but the kind that accepted him fully. He realized then that love did not arrive as a sudden feeling. It grew quietly from shared effort and mutual respect. His past still existed. It did not disappear, but it no longer controlled his present. He had learned that pain could shape a person, but it did not have to define them forever. He had mistaken emotional distance for strength, when true strength came from openness. There were still challenges. Life did not become perfect. There were disagreements, tired days, and moments of misunderstanding. But now they faced them together. When things felt heavy, they talked. When words failed, silence no longer felt threatening. Trust, he realized, was not about certainty. It was about choosing belief, even when doubt appeared. One day he overheard someone describe his wife as someone who brought peace wherever she went. The words stayed with him. He thought about how true that was, not just for others, but for him. She had not changed his life with grand gestures or dramatic moments. She had changed it by being steady when he was unsure. He reflected on the man he used to be, the one who expected nothing so he could never be disappointed. That man had survived, but he had not truly lived. Now life felt fuller, not louder or easier, just meaningful. He had judged too quickly. He had expected a plain life because he believed that was all he deserved. But what arrived instead was depth, patience, and understanding. Beauty, he learned, was not about appearance. It was about presence, about how someone made you feel safe enough to be yourself. As time passed, their bond grew stronger. They built trust through everyday actions, a listening ear, a shared laugh, quiet support during difficult moments. These were the things that lasted. One night, as they sat together after a long day, he looked at her and felt gratitude, not the kind that needed to be spoken, but the kind that settled deep in the heart. He had been given a second chance at connection not because he searched for it, but because he allowed it. He understood then that life often surprises those who expect the least. The marriage he once accepted as a duty had become a partnership. The home he once saw as a place to rest had become a place to feel alive. The future he once imagined as empty now held purpose. He no longer feared emotions. He no longer avoided attachment. Valued it. The man who had stood at his wedding expecting a quiet, distant life now smiled at the memory. Not because he was ashamed of who he was then, but because he was grateful for how far he had come. Change did not happen because the bride was beautiful. Change happened because she was real. She met him where he was, not where she wished him to be. And, in doing so, she helped him meet himself again. Looking back, he understood that some of the most powerful transformations begin with misunderstanding, with low expectations, with guarded hearts. And sometimes, the very thing you expect the least becomes the reason your life changes forever. He had learned that love was not loud. It was patient. It stayed. And as he stepped forward into the future beside her, he no longer felt afraid of what lay ahead. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer walking alone.